By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet!
Go Planet!
Whoa, really not feeling the love today, kids. It's not my abs, is it? I switched trainers. I've just got to rehire Jenny. No, Cap. Today's mission is gonna be kinda intense. Has Hoggish greedily reunited the eco-villains again?
No, Captain Planet.
So who is this villain in need of a good sound thrashing? Oh no! Have eco-terrorists taken over the capital?
You might say that. The United States is the second largest polluter on Earth behind China.
To truly make a difference.
We must overthrow the United States government.
Is Aston Kutcher around here somewhere? We're not waging war on America.
Not just America. Once we command the U.S. military, we'll fight China to the death.
This is so important. We'll fight our own people.
I'm from Thailand.
The capital of China.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland, 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 oh, Dixieland.
Tyler's not here to do the thing. Anyway. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Dixieland the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland the Proletariat or Dixie Prole. And if you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, then subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Dixie Prole. We got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, cookbook, Discord server, Twitch stream, and exclusive episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist with some great artists you also check out, as well as our merch store. This podcast is brought to you by Contractional Monogamy, Therapy, Vaping, Living at Home, Modelo, Pushing People in Swamps, Tommy Cheating Death, Lowry Salt, and Mama July, and Honey Big Big. Shout out to our new Patreon subscribers, Bex, Mark, Tarvis, Alejandro, Derek, Baron Chuck, Cass, Ian, Kelly, Coleman, Anthony, Justin, and Kenneth. Our monthly Patreon surplus goes to groups that are run by and help marginalized folks directly. As always, I'm Nelson with...
Christopher Columbus.
And I'm fucked right off.
Hey, I'm Tyler. I kill pigs with a hammer. And our guests this evening are...
This is Andy from the Poor Proles Almanac.
And this is Elliot, the co-host from the Poor Proles Almanac.
And it's a crossover episode, a small niche group of fans wanted. Woo!
What's up, Laurel?
We're doing the
Laurel,
damn
what's
thing.
up? Yeah, shout out to Laurel, the one that like the super fan of both podcasts.
She's the best.
She is.
Good things happen. Let's make them happen.
Let's make them happen. Oh, man. I always thought y'all were in the Midwest for some reason. I don't know why. I'm probably just prejudiced because I thought that's like, okay, farming, that has to be Poor Proles Almanac. But no, I found y'all a bunch of Yankees. So
You are in a different time zone.
You know, you're just invading the podcast. It's like Sherman burning Atlanta again.
Yeah, I came on this podcast and started talking about North Dakota, and it's just gone to shit from there. Like it was all Southern, and then I showed up, and here we are, Yankees on the show.
All right. Also, we're gonna play a game tonight, y'all, with everyone here and our listeners. We're gonna time to see what time Tommy officially nods off from this podcast. So it is 8:44 Central Standard Time right now. We're clocking it, and so just remember, and we'll mark that time down. And we'll see how long he lasts. So I'm giving about 30 minutes.
I was going to say the over-under at 37 minutes. We'll see how long the episode goes.
The minute you hit that theory button, I'm calling it.
Somebody quickly pull out a copy of the Conquest of Bread.
It's the Commonwealth of Bread, I think.
It's just a loaf of bread. That's the book. It's just a loaf of bread.
Somebody pulls out an actual loaf of bread.
Oh man! All right, Andy, Elliot, real quick, tell us about the podcast because I found out about y'all. I think Rev left. I think Brett mentioned about y'all. And
that's cool.
And I remember we follow each other on Instagram, and I listened to the episode about John Deere tractors because my family owns John Deere tractors, and I understand that plight about not being able to to work on them. Well, we have older ones, and everyone's buying older ones now because you can't work on the new ones because John Deere won't give out the codes. So just tell us about the podcast. How'd y'all get started? How do a bunch of Yankees know about farming?
So I mean, I'll start and I'll let Andy pick up because Andy, I think you'll be able to pick up where I leave off. But we had a close friend who had passed about a year ago, and Andy and I had met up and we hadn't seen each other in a while. And we drove down to Maryland to pay our respects. And on the way down, just in passing, I mentioned, we had a few conversations that kind of resonated with me on our short car ride down to Maryland. And I was like, I wonder if there's a podcast other than It Could Happen Here and a few others that sort of get this conversation that we're having right now, if other people are having these conversations. And I just sort of said it in passing. And on the way back, it was about maybe 2 weeks later, Andy hit me up and was like, I've got 13 episodes written and we should totally get this going. I found a microphone in my basement and let's do all this stuff. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? I had no idea what he was talking about. And he was like, no, you had a good idea about starting the podcast. I was like, I don't think anybody wants to listen to any of this, but we grabbed a couple of microphones and got started. And here we are. That's pretty much how we got here. So Andy, what happened in those 2 weeks? What got you to start this after I opened my big mouth?
Yeah. So, we were talking about what exists today. We all agree is this isn't sustainable, whether it's from filling up landfills or climate change or the limitations of our food system, our economic model. We all agree this can't continue. And not a lot of people are saying, okay, well, pragmatically, realistically, what's our goal? What's our alternative? What are we going to do to show a vision of a better future and what we're fighting for? And, as somebody that's a farmer and has been around things like permaculture and regenerative agriculture, a lot of that stuff has always been kind of playing in my head, and it's always kind of existed outside of my politics. And that conversation kind of started getting those wheels turning. And I'd been thinking about working on a book and trying to put my thoughts on paper so that I could figure out how to articulate how I felt, because it wasn't something if somebody asked me, when Elliot asked me on that drive, if we didn't have 14 hours sitting in a car, I wouldn't have been able to get out a straight thought. But sitting there and having to thoughtfully go through that process and not being able to be distracted by life, it became really evident that there was a lot more to the conversation, and I didn't know anyone else doing it. And it wasn't really that I wanted to start a podcast. It was more of somebody needs to do this, and no one else had. So we're like, yeah, let's give it a try. And when we had 10 listeners one day, I was like, oh my God, we're huge. And that seems silly now, but it was really cool to see it grow.
Right. And I think I enjoy having the conversations because it helps me piece together the little bits of knowledge that I do have, because nobody has all the answers, but I just like to try to make sense of all of it. And having conversations helps me wrap my head around how things work and how things fit together and what I want my part to be in it, or how I think I can help, or what I think I can do, because you can't do all of it yourself. So I'm just trying to figure out, where I fit in.
That's pretty cool. Andy, you mentioned that you come from farming, but we all into more environmental stuff. You and Elliot before the podcast, what was the driving force? You said you listened to some stuff, but what was the driving force behind it? With me, it's history and politics, and for Kai, it's Indigenous history. For Tommy, it's shitting on me. What's the I guess the overarching thing, and what did you guys do before that brought upon this podcast?
Wait,
Yeah.
and also, what do you farm?
What do I farm?
Tommy has a very specific answer to this that he wants you to say.
Okay.
A specific crop.
So I do farm that crop because I live in Massachusetts. I was actually, my hands are disgusting if you can see them, because it's that time of year and I've been trimming. Elliot's a former professional trimmer, so he can speak to it much better than I can. But But yeah, I farm a lot of stuff. I do a lot of multi-species grazing in a silvopasture system, which means essentially like a fancy forest with different types of animals that work their way through. So I have sheep, ducks, chickens, turkeys, all that good stuff, and lots of like nut crops and fruit crops and things like that. So yeah, like my point was that like with this project, there isn't a cohesion of politics and agriculture and ecology, and trying to bring these things together to say ecology enforces our framework of politics, which enforces our framework of agriculture. And all of these things are equally important in understanding our relationship with place and time and culture and identity, and of how we think about our place in the world, essentially. So it's just as much philosophy and, again, politics and all these things kind of incorporated together to make a cohesive narrative. So I don't know if that answers at all any better, but that is my answer.
No, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty close for me too. I was working in restaurants for a while and had been doing the ordering for some of our food, and had asked a couple of questions about where it comes from, and then found out that there were maybe 3 distributors that delivered our food, and then asked where that was coming from, and it was coming from all over the country. And so I started looking into the whole buy local thing, and to see how expensive it was to buy local versus using larger supply chains. And it was a few dollars, not anything big like that, but it was too much to get, the small restaurants that I was working in, to get them to pay money to use local ingredients, because, they're making money on margin and all of that. So I left the restaurant industry, ended up in the medical marijuana industry. That's where I started trimming professionally, as Andy likes to say. They paid me to trim some weed and farm some weed, but none of it was mine. I did get a pretty decent discount though, so I'm not going to knock that. And I'm not in the industry anymore, but now it comes down to food for me, and I'm looking for food independence and being able to not really be self-sustainable all by myself, but be able to give myself the opportunity to maybe save a little bit of money by not having to buy certain things that I can do myself, because I live in suburbia. I'm not going to have a huge farm or a couple acres like Andy does. It's a lot smaller than that, but I don't know. It came down to a point where I wanted to learn how to use what I've got to do the best that I can, rather than having a lawn and mowing it every weekend because it looks nice,
Oh God, yeah. No. I feel you on the lawn bit. It's the worst.
It's one of the things that my wife and I talk about all the time, and she's just like, "You're drunk, stop talking about the lawn." I don't want it anymore. I get drunk and I yell at the lawn. It is what it is. I'm not the only one. Don't look at me like I'm crazy.
Andy, I mean, we talk about like people having stereotypes about the South. I'm not gonna lie. When I think of Massachusetts, I don't think of farming at all. I always just picture Boston and like Chappaquiddy and the Kennedys. So I'm guessing more inland is where the farming's at.
Yes and no. It really depends. Massachusetts is pretty rural, surprisingly, outside of like 7 cities. I know compared to like other parts of the country that it's not at all, but you can get 10 miles outside of Boston and be in farm country, depending on the direction you go. So that's, it is what it is. But Massachusetts has its own challenges because of the cost of real estate and the fact that they spent hundreds of years poisoning everything to the point where you can't eat freshwater fish. But it is what it is. It's where we're at.
No, we have that problem. Yeah. Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a lot of industrialization from around World War II and before in the area that I live in. And they're just finding now that there's still, toxicity in the water and in a lot of the land like around here, but they're just putting the data together from the past maybe 10 years or so. So these are areas that I grew up in, and they're finding out that, it's not so great. And
there's a couple super fun sites like
Yeah.
within walking distance from where we grew up. So, take that as you will.
Yeah. Our third episode, Don't Drink the Water, about Aniston, when Monsanto just completely poisoned the entire town of Aniston with the groundwater because of cancers causing stuff that gave massive tumors and gave people cancer. But yeah, no, we have that problem here with industrial waste and runoff from fertilizer from farming, because we're still a massive farming community in the South. And it's funny when people like go camping for the first time, they're like, "Oh, this nice, cool creek, this spring should be great to drink out of," and then like 2 hours later, they have dysentery. Like, you still have to filter it.
It's just like Oregon Trail taught you.
So I am gonna need a sample mailed in to our mailbox. So whenever you're ready.
Quality control.
I'll get farming right away. Don't worry about it. I got you, Tommy.
Tommy's gonna end up in one of those prisons that Governor Meemaw is trying to build with our COVID relief money.
I mean, somebody's gonna have to fill that prison, and it's not gonna be whites, okay?
Oh man. So I know we're gonna talk about regenerative farming and things along that line, but I was listening to one of the few anarchists I like, Robert Evans' podcast, It Could Happen Here. And I didn't realize when he talked about food security and the food supply, I didn't realize how many like individual states like contribute so much to the food supply. Like he went down like California alone produces more than like, I think he named off like 7 other states combined. And I was like, that cannot be good, especially when like California experiences droughts all the time. You have wildfires, you have all these problems. So like into that, like from y'all that talk about farming in the podcast about farming, et cetera, and the environment, in your opinion, what is the biggest factor? What's the biggest problem we're facing when it comes to farming? Like what do we need to worry about?
In terms of like the world we live in today, or like if it could happen here?
That's a good one. So I think in terms of like what's happening right now that you're like, this is going to cause problems. Besides, like everyone's like climate change. We know that climate change is the umbrella problem. But like, for instance, I was reading an article about topsoil in the Midwest. I was going
to say, do you want to tackle the topsoil thing? Because I think that's the most immediate.
Yeah, I mean, based on most figures, there's between 50 and 150 at best years with our topsoil in most of the areas that are heavily farmed today. So, and that's dependent on a number of different things. Obviously, climate change, as new chemicals and fertilizers and things are utilized or reduced in order to not destroy the soil so much. There's things that can impact what that number ends up being. But the point is there's a finite amount of times we can continue to do things the way we are today. And then we run out of topsoil. Fortunately for us, with climate change, as the band of where we can grow food changes, there's all new lands for us to exploit. Obviously, this is not a long-term solution.
It's creeping north.
Yeah, it's creeping north. And like, it's not just, okay, we're going to go 300 miles north and just kind of chug along. Like it becomes much more complicated for a number of different reasons. The borders, for a start, infrastructure. Our infrastructure is designed to move food from where we grow it today, not 300 miles north of where we grow it, but where it is today. It's a complicated issue, and I think it's kind of delusional to think we have a straight answer of what that looks like in the near and within our lifetimes. The best case scenario is that it doesn't get too fucked, essentially. But the reality is that like we are going off a cliff. We just don't know where that edge of the cliff is.
And my whole thing exactly when I started talking about this podcast was finding out what, where my part fits in, because I'm not a farmer. I'm not gonna, grow a bunch of food for the country or anybody else. It's just gonna be supplemental for, do what I can to help myself out as much as I can. But if more people take that same approach and do what they can with what they have, then you don't have to move food from, one part of the country to the other. It sort of gives you a chance to at least make it a little bit until somebody else starts growing enough food where you can start having it shipped into you. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. But
Just start robbing you.
it's right. We're trying to prevent all of that. Hopefully, if everybody does their thing, you won't have to. You know what I mean? The robbery would be supplemental. I hope it always is. If you're robbing to eat, then there's bigger problems. But I'm just saying, as long as you keep it supplemental.
That's the future Tommy wants. He doesn't want to farm. He just wants to rob people.
I'm not farming shit. I'm just gonna find some nigga that's got it.
I'll leave whatever I farm. If I have too much, I'll leave it on the porch for you. Okay.
With some bud.
And since Tommy doesn't walk, we found out Tommy doesn't walk. He's gonna be doing this in a hover round. This is gonna have two Mac 10s and just spraying people.
This
is
my
a future
Segway strap.
This is a future that I will allow. I will allow that.
I got a decked out bulletproof Segway that I just stroll through and snatch your shit up with.
Wait. It depends on what kind of battery you're using, because then you still have to worry about lithium in batteries and all that shit. So
it's Robo Tommy.
I'm just gonna put some stairs around my house. I'll be good.
no, I told. Go ahead, Tommy.
Now I'm saying I'm gonna build it from all the Tesla parts that go unused.
I did tell Tommy today, I was actually in London today and I saw a man with bionic legs, like legit 2 bionic legs. He had what looked like amputation above the knees. They were silver, they were shiny, they had pistons on them. They were bionic legs. That's what we're going to find you. We're going to get you some bionic legs. And then there's nothing left to worry about.
Maybe, yes.
Tommy's
Gonna
gonna
put work.
I'm picturing Robo Tommy right now. Ready?
Robo Tommy.
Break yourself. You have 10 seconds to comply.
Wait, are we doing full Darth Maul here or what?
RoboCop,
is it going to be?
No, it's RoboCop Tommy. And the thing is, since it's made out of Tesla parts, when he puts it in autopilot, it's just gonna crash.
I'm gonna start veering into pedestrians.
It's not going to have the recognition system worked out yet, and you're just going to roll out into traffic one day.
Dead or alive, you're coming to it. No, dead or alive, I'm taking your stuff.
Okay, this got weird real quick.
I don't know how we went from point A to point B. We take like 2 weeks off. We just come back and it's fucking wild. Oh, man. I'm sorry, y'all. Andy and Elliot, y'all have a professional podcast with a good intro music that sounds nice and good content, and we have
Nelson.
What on earth did you agree to be on this show?
We still have an intro music I came up with 5 minutes before our first episode. It's offbeat as fuck.
It's awesome.
Oh, man.
We can't change it now.
Thank you. It gets better the more you listen to it because you forget how bad it is.
It's unique. It's not bad.
It's like Greta Van Fleet. The more you listen to it, you're more like, maybe this could be okay.
Oh, that's too funny.
But so I guess with the topsoil thing, it harkens back to like the Dust Bowl almost. So like, are we looking at like another Dust Bowl that like my grandparents talked about it when they were alive? Like, it was a thing. Like, are we looking down the barrel at that? Like, is that going to happen? We think?
Yeah, it's not an if, it's a when. And it's far more complicated because of the role the U.S. plays in the global food market. The U.S. produces far more food than most other countries. And like you were talking about California produces more food than most countries without the Midwest. And yeah, it's pretty frightening how much food comes out of the United States. And we rely on a handful of crops, and like it's a recipe for disaster in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the constant use of the petrochemicals to turn over the crops year after year, rather than helping build up the soil and keep the soil healthy, so you can prevent dust bowls. It's just not a priority. And until it becomes a priority and how food is grown, if we're going to continue to grow it the way that we are, it's just going to get worse and worse. So that's one of the things that needs to be tackled. There's like this no-till movement going on right now. I don't know how much traction it's getting right now. It's been, I think, going pretty good since 2010-ish. But on like factory farming levels, I don't know if that's picking up there. Strictly because it's just not gonna make money with the turn and burn style that they're doing now.
I guess that goes into my next question. Like, I know the cop out answer is capitalism, but like, how did we get here? Like, I thought we knew about like things like crop rotation and
Colonization, Nelson. Colonization. Okay, now you can answer the rest of it. I'm sorry, guys.
When the Italians came over.
Oh, watch out.
It's all because they wanted tomatoes. That's literally it.
Yeah, whoa, we wanted tomatoes.
What's today again?
That's our shit, all right?
Today is Iron Eyes Cody Day. We already came up with this. It's compromise.
Oh, I'm going to get into the indigenous shit later on. I'm letting everybody be nice now.
Yeah. So in terms of how we got here, I honestly wouldn't even know where to start. Essentially, in the early 20th century, the realization that we could create fertilizers out of oil, essentially, and utilizing oil as a way to process and to make cheap fertilizers that could make things grow without having to take care of the land was like, hey, oil costs almost nothing. Let's make essentially free fertilizer. And also at the same time, we've got this corn industry, which is growing for a whole bunch of reasons. And that's another podcast episode in itself. But we essentially subsidize a bunch of industries for landowners and made it as simple as possible, and then tried to find uses for those things afterwards, because we were just growing like so much corn that we were just shoving it in everything. And that's why we have high sugar sodas with high fructose corn syrup, and ethanol for cars, and all these other things that all feed into this, like, again, capitalism that just like reinforce this need to create ways to make rich people more money and to subsidize these industries and just keep things going. And corn is a great utility. It's a great food that we can use for like a bunch of different things, but not the way we're doing it.
Yeah, without saying or blaming capitalism or using that as the answer to the question, it just comes down to dependence. We've been doing this for so long and subsidizing into it for so long, just like Social Security. People are paying into it and they're never going to get that back. It's the same thing with how we've subsidized corn. We've just been paying into it and we're not going to get the return from it. The return on investment has dwindled down to nothing. And we have to try to do our best to mitigate our losses and switch off. The sooner, the better. But the longer we stay on this course, the more we're losing out. And that's pretty much what we're talking about in the podcast, is trying to figure out how to make that switch and make it hurt as little as possible so that we can sort of pick up where we've left off. And it's not just collapse and, building from the ashes. It's sort of just picking up the pieces and moving on.
Womp womp womp. So it really was the Italians' fault. Our sweat is so salty that it just ruined the land. That's what it was.
We have that effect.
I noticed the flag. I noticed the name of the flag right on this beautiful day for 15.7 million Italian Americans.
So my family's from Italy. They are like, why do you guys care? It's very Sopranos. Like, American Italians are very different than Italian Italians.
You just released the monster on this show. I can't believe you said that.
I'm not. I agree. I'm not.
You're not going to go on a 15-minute tirade about how good the episode was and quote every moment of it.
No, I'm not, because I went to therapy this week and I feel good about myself. So I'm not. I don't have the need to.
You got it all out.
To do that, I ranted to someone that I pay money to, so that helps me with my brain problems. So I don't have the need to talk about the episode of Sopranos called Christopher. That's really good.
Specific one.
Now we're gonna talk about Many Saints of Newark and how much I fucking hated it. Yeah, we can get into that.
It went out. So my roommate was home while we were watching it, and when everybody leaves, he was like, "Dude, what the fuck was going on?" All I heard was, "Oh, and I and gabagoo and oh." Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet, so apparently it was good.
You just got a
it was
summarization
great.
of it.
Great.
It was great.
Some guy dies and comes back to life as a whole new person.
Yeah, it's
He gets
crazy.
reborn again.
They just
I
Game of
haven't
Thrones-
seen
They
it.
just Game of Thrones it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I haven't seen the entire thing, but I did watch a movie with Tommy the other day, and he had to show me that particular part where somebody is just miraculously resurrected.
Basically.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to mention that I'm not just being a salty Indian right now saying that it's colonization, but I would say that it goes a little bit further back than like the early 20th century with fertilizer and all of that it did have a lot to do with decimating the bison that were on the plains, that were indigenous to the kind of grasses and plants that were on the plains, to bring in cattle, which are not indigenous and do not mesh the same way with all of it. That also had a lot to do with it, which also killing off the bison had a lot to do with killing off the Native Americans who were still in the plains, who were still giving the US Army troubles and all that. It is colonization as well. So.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
100. Yeah.
Like I said, how much time you got?
Well, that's why it's a hard question though, because how far back do we go?
1492. We're talking about it today.
Kai goes beyond that. Kai always, when episode goes the farthest back she can.
I started 14,000 years back one time.
Okay, so we're getting to the root of all problems.
God.
All of them.
Agriculture.
All of them, yeah.
The problem started when white people in Europe were like, fuck, we need to get off this godforsaken continent.
Are you guys tired of getting raided by other white people? Yeah, let's get out of here. let's go raid other people.
They were practicing on the British Isles for generations before they even thought about that elsewhere.
What really happened is that England, the British Isles had shitty food, and that's what it was. It's like the United Kingdom, what is today the United Kingdom, had
Look,
horrible
okay.
food.
Look, they decided to come over here. They brought smallpox and Eurasian diseases. They got corn, tomatoes, chocolate, potatoes, all the good shit. And we got fucking diseases, all right?
And syphilis. We got syphilis.
Back
Thanks for sharing, Nelson.
I didn't know that we were getting that personal today.
I'm just shaking. Oh man. Fuck. So basically,
Diet Coke break.
That's how you got syphilis in the first place.
so basically, we're fucked. Is what you're trying. Was what you're telling me. So Tommy's right.
Yeah.
Tommy's
Yeah.
right. We should just get robot, turn the RoboCop, and just go around robbing.
Get
folks.
spare parts. Don't forget the spare parts. That's important.
You gotta learn how to fix yourself. You're gonna be
Yeah.
a robot.
I'm ready for these cyber augmentations. You know, I want to be able to download shit in my brain. All right. I'm
Quit
ready.
relying on lithium for your rechargeable batteries,
Yes.
because that's just gonna fuck shit up again.
I saw a cool thing the other
Especially
day
if
about
Samsung is making it.
Oh,
What year is
God,
it, Tommy?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry, Elliot. What were you saying?
I saw a cool thing the other day about saltwater pond batteries and how cool those are. And I wish I could go into depth more, but basically they use a saline pond to store energy as it heats up. They can trap that heat energy and use thermal and electric energy from it. And it's a pretty cool thing. And I want to learn more about it. It's a cool idea, cool concept.
We're gonna strap
And-
everyone to salt water and just like you're good. Got that energy.
Well, just if you have the space for it, and if you're not on the coast, then if you got enough salt, there's salt a whole bunch of places. It's got to be pretty salty, I think. But salt and water is the key.
True. And I want to, speaking of farming, I want to learn how to use ammonium nitrate in other ways. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Brought to you by Lowry's.
Now,
What I guess
How are
so.
you so intent on putting us on a watch list?
Tommy. We're already on. Tommy, you've been on a watch list since birth. Okay, Kai's been on a watch list since birth.
I want to be able to fly
I'm on this
on a
watch
plane.
list now.
Okay, I want to be able to go and see other countries. I can't with your attitude, Nelson.
You're gonna have to get a different passport other than America. I literally don't think they'll let you in with an American passport.
No, they won't.
You got a Canadian something. Where you at?
Not just French Canadian. You got to be French Canadian, Tommy.
No,
We.
the Quebecois are basically the Texans of Canada.
How dare you? We are French. We are better than that.
They are my personal nemesis. They're the ones that surround my family's reservation in Canada.
Just like Irish Americans for me. I'm glad to know
They surround your reservation.
Yeah.
No, I despise them with every fiber of my being.
He calls Boston his reservation. That's Nelson's reservation.
I mean, to be fair, Boston is pretty terrible.
It is. It is horrible.
Yeah.
I won't drive there. Yeah, I won't do it.
I don't blame you. One of my racist grandfathers is from there, so I can only imagine what it's like in real life.
No, just driving there doesn't make any sense. It's one of the, it's a pretty old city before they made cities grids. And so they quite literally in the city, they paved cow paths. And so in the city, there's like a weird spiral sort of thing going on because that's how the cows graze and stuff. And that's how they pave the streets. So it's just a spiral of insanity. And if you miss your turn, you're going over to the bridge to Cambridge and you're leaving Boston.
I heard about this. I heard about how you can be on one road and it like all of a sudden just merges into another one and you have no idea where, and all of a sudden you're backwards and like, where the fuck did I go? The big dig or whatever the fuck y'all had.
Oh yeah, the tunnel. I love that tunnel.
Yeah, they sort of finished it and then they didn't finish it and said they were done with it, but they just sunk a whole bunch of money into it and there was a whole bunch of corruption and people got paid before it was done and then they didn't finish it and then they had somebody else come in and sort of finish it and then they didn't and
now you send traffic anyway. The traffic that was never supposed to happen.
Sounds like the type of stuff that Andy and I's family get into. Paying people that construction jobs that you don't show up for.
Yep.
There you go.
Nelson, this podcast can't get any more middle-aged than this.
It can.
I want to hear more about this
section of the city like that. They built the whole section of the city like that with like Back Bay and stuff. It was swampland, and they
build it in.
Put a whole bunch of sand and dirt there, and then built the city on it, and it's like sinking now. And like everybody knows it, but they're like, "Hey, what are you gonna do?" And it's like, "Hey, maybe don't build the city on a sinking wetlands." I guess I don't know.
They put UMass Boston right on the wetlands, and now like the buildings that are closest to the wetlands are sinking, so you can't use them anymore. So their solution was to build like 100 feet away, because that's just going to solve everything.
They just moved it, yeah. And that's what they do to all the real estate around there. It's absolutely insane.
It's the earth healing itself.
You go to talk to somebody about it and like ask more questions, and the more answers you get, the more problems you see. And it's like there's no fixing it. Like just get a bulldozer, drag it, and like start over again. But it's not that simple, It's not a farm. You can't do that. It's a city.
I just want to chime in as the resident Floridian that I am sick to death of hearing about like Europeans like have decided that swamps are useless. They keep draining them and building shit on top of them because who the fuck needs natural filtration systems and decomposition systems and things like that? And then they wonder why the cities are sinking and there's so much pollution.
Right.
I don't know now.
We should put a lawn there.
Well, Disney World, come on now.
Yeah, I mean.
I know. I grew up 20 minutes away from it.
We want natural filtration and hurricane protection, or we want Disneyland? Disney World. We want Disney World.
And now they as an aside, I suppose, now they say that they can't do anything about that because a lot of there's a whole bunch of Disney property that's not actually buildings. There's a whole big chunk of it in the middle of Florida that's Disney property, but there's no buildings on it, or it's just little through roads, and they can't do anything about it now because those systems where they haven't built buildings are the last places that a lot of these plants and animals have to live because it's so built up around it that it's like a nature preserve inside Disney now. I haven't seen more wild deer in my life than on Disney property.
That's the only place that's deer in Florida now. It's on the Disney property.
Well,
No,
there's
I'm
deer
asking,
across
seriously.
Florida, but
They're
there's
branded
deer
with
in
the Disney
Florida,
logo.
but so I did grow up 20
They have mouse, like Mickey Mouse ears. That's the deer.
minutes away from Disney property.
It came a
Did
part.
this
It
just
came
cut
as
out?
part of the Marvel deal.
Yeah, you cut out, Kai.
I'm sorry. So yeah, there are deer in the rest of Florida, but Orlando/Kissimmee, which is where Disney is, it's actually in Lake Buena Vista, which is kind of between the two. It's so built up around there that like Disney is this kind of green spot in the middle, and there's no way like they're like outside of. So there's Disney, which is this green spot, and then you have Kissimmee, Lake Buena Vista, and Orlando all the way around it, and then it's farmland after that. So there's like this gray belt around Disney that nothing can get out of. And when I've been on Disney property, because my dad used to work there, I've been on like backlots and everything. I've seen bobcat, wild turkey, more deer than I've ever seen in my life. Lots of gators. I mean, gators aren't endangered anymore, but loads of gators, black bear, all kinds of stuff out there because Disney just kind of sectioned off this area. And now it's basically a wildlife. There's actually, there was 2 golf courses that were on kind of the far side of Disney, kind of near one of the borders. They tore that down and built a 4 Seasons hotel, but there was these 2 golf courses out there where part of the draw to going to these golf courses was that you would see wild animals because they built them over swamps and shit. I was on one of those golf courses watching a bobcat jump out of a swamp and into the other one.
Yeah. So you're on hole 4 and it's like, what are all these animals doing here? And it's like,
basically
they're pretty much trapped in Disney. So
It's fucking Chubbs.
Are you going to tee off?
That's basically like a lot of golf courses in Florida. Like Florida has loads of golf courses and thankfully they're starting to die off. But a lot of golf courses would like say that they could stay. Like you should let us stay because animals live in our like woods and everything that's around because they leave woods as like set dressing for them. So they you can't tear us down because there's animals that live here now.
That's where Chubbs from Happy Gilmore lost his hand. Damn gator bit my hand off. What? Okay, I guess to veer back into kind of what we were talking about, I guess like what can we do to I don't know if we can ward off the inevitable. What can we do to cushion it or like to make things better? Like what could we do to change things?
You know, this is like one of those things where it's really complicated, but also really simple. There's so many things we can do in terms of like having chickens or, you know, growing, you know, some celery or tomatoes or whatever. And like, those aren't going to be necessarily calorically significant, but part of, you know, what we were just talking about before is this idea of like, you can't do everything yourself. And like, you figure out what you like to do and what you're good at. And collectively, we can contribute and create more than what we can individually because we can specialize, get those marginal efficiencies and those types of things. Where if you already have 10 heads of celery growing, adding one more isn't significantly more work. But if you have 10 heads of celery and then you're going to grow tomatoes, which needs something totally different in terms of care, that's adding a lot more work for, you know, whatever might be, you know, equal caloric content. So in trying to figure out kind of how much you can scale without losing that sense of community and being able to work together, that's kind of where the sweet spot is trying to, you know, build those neighborhoods of resilience, those communities of resilience. And while again, growing tomatoes and those types of things aren't really going to solve your food problems. Like they're, you know, nobody is like, I had a, you know, a tomato garden and like I didn't have to eat anything else for a month. Like you need other things, you need protein and all these other things that are much more difficult to either grow or process. And a lot of that comes back to this idea of fundamentally rethinking how we eat in our relationship with our local ecosystem and what's natural and belongs in those ecosystems in terms of the food that we're growing, the livestock that we're raising, and all of these things that we might not be able to necessarily go back to how things used to be, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot that we can learn from that and to bring in those voices that have that knowledge to try to figure out a way that we don't all starve to death.
And I think in the short term, for anybody who's not a farmer now or anybody who doesn't grow their own food, is to learn as much as you can on how to do what you can for yourself. And in the meantime, in the short term, for everybody else who is still part of this capitalist machine and has to do what they have to do to get food in their house, it's going to be try to insulate yourself from the shifts in the supply chain and how things are going to change. It's difficult to get chicken wings where we are right now, which is simple right now, and it's not a big deal. But, there's going to be other shortages of goods across the board, just like at the beginning of COVID. Coming up, food's going to be more expensive. So you're just going to have to be smart with your money and do what you can and be economic so that you can, try to, if you haven't already started to make a plan for the future, start now and figure out what you're going to do for the next couple of years, because I don't think food is going to be easier to get for a while. It's going to get probably more difficult.
As somebody who's living in the UK right now, thanks to COVID plus Brexit happening at the same time, we are having shortages across the country because we had so much trade with the continent. And not only we have a trouble getting enough truckers to transport food right now and petrol to fuel those trucks, but we also have, diesel to fuel those trucks. We also have difficulty getting things from the continent to here. I mean, the British have really gone in on trying to promote British produce and British meats and everything like that. And most of the time, unless you're buying very, very, very cheap or very, very, very expensive, your food in the UK is going to have very low food miles on it. But when there's things that you just can't grow here because it's a tiny little island that can only grow so many different things, and people have now gotten a taste for things that you can only grow on the continent or elsewhere, or hunt or farm on the continent or elsewhere, we are now facing shortages. We've recently had shortages of milk. You wouldn't think that milk would be difficult to find in the UK. You'd think that we have a lot of dairy farms, and we do, but we don't have enough for us. We don't have enough for the island right now. And granted, this is kind of on a small scale because the UK is only about the size of, I think, was it north to south from the top of Georgia to the bottom of Florida? That's about the size of the UK. But that's happening here now because we've basically cut off our own feet by going through with Brexit and all of that. But that can happen in the States, and it's obviously starting if you guys are already noticing shortages of things.
Right. And so that's one of the things I think is going to happen in the near future. And our podcast is about farming and growing food and food systems. But again, not everybody is going to be a farmer, and that's not really what it's about. If you don't have your own land or anything like that, maybe now's the time to start talking to your neighbors and figuring out what can we buy in bulk to save a little bit of money between all of us, because inflation's just going up and you're going to have to stretch your money. And again, you can't do it all yourself. So these are things that people are seriously going to have to consider. And, I have faith that people will make it work, but this is just one of the situations where it's got to get worse before it gets better, just because of where we are right now. And then again, taking what we know and what we can learn and moving forward is the only thing that's going to keep us positive enough to push through all of it. Because we do our podcast, and at the end of it, I'm like, oh, this is daunting. But at the same time, I feel like I'm learning something, and that's a better feeling rather than the crushing weight of our impending doom, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I just really work on Elliot and just get him real depressed is the goal of every episode.
It's sad. I drive home with no radio. Just quiet.
Him and his dark thoughts.
Every time I get home, I think my truck's got a knock in it. I don't want to think about it. No, it's fine. It's a 04. It's still going strong. We're good.
Just disassociating while driving.
The American way.
It's dark. There's drops of rain coming down the windshield, reflecting the tail lights of everything else. It's a 1998 music video going on right now.
He's so good at it.
Yeah.
So good at it.
That's my goal, is to just really break them down. You got to break them down, then build them back up is really the goal. So I just make everyone as depressed as possible about how fucked we are, and then say, all right, now where do we go from here? And again, it ties in all of those things about, you can't do it alone. You need to build community. How do you build community? Through food, collective identity, all of these different things, and just try to give an idea of what the future could look like, as opposed to letting the right wing be the ones that can point to the past and say, hey, this is what we want, and you guys like your parents or whoever talk about how great it was back then, and we're going to bring that back. And the left kind of struggles with having that kind of being able to say, here's an example of things that were great. So instead we have to try to paint a picture of what it could look like.
Yeah. Now I'm depressed.
Sorry.
See, so good at it.
So
He's so good at it.
You can't get me
telling
down
you.
because I'm here with all of my ancestors behind me, about to ask you about re-indigenization of all of this. Okay, you got me before I really chomped down on this, because you did mention things about dealing with your specific ecosystem and things that were naturally occurring there, and how you can use that to your benefit. But I do want to know, I know already that we can't change the food system, especially in the United States, probably Canada, to completely re-indigenize it, to help fight climate change, and to help with the everything that's kind of happening with growing conditions and hunting or farming conditions down there. But I do want to know, how much of your focus would eventually be on re-indigenization? Could you conceive of a world where we really pushed for indigenous crops and indigenous animals for farming and things like that, and not even the way that farming is happening now, but more of a hunting or a more sympathetic farming system? Because I am going to admit that I haven't listened to your podcast because I live under a rock and I don't watch TV or listen to podcasts, and I'm on one. However, my focus has always been on indigenous people, because that's my people. That's who I'm used to listening to and watching. And a lot of them are really pushing efforts for seed keepers. So heirloom varieties, very ancient varieties of crops and everything, and pushing more for healthier water systems so that you can fish better, and healthier ecosystems so that you can hunt better, and try to cut down on the environmental havoc that's been wrought by cattle farming and a lot of other farming. Do people farm sheep in the States now, really?
I do.
Well, I mean on a large scale. I don't remember in the States
there
ever
are
driving
some.
through an area and going large sheep farms, but I want to know your thoughts on this and how much of this you're looking towards, because
Sure.
The things that you guys are talking about are echoing what I hear all the time from seed keepers and from indigenous people who are trying to go back to those old food ways. But it seems like it's so far away and it's kind of out of our hands, but it's something that is very centralized to those communities. So sure. In the Northeast with the Three Sisters planting method and reintroducing buffalo through the plains and using them for food and everything that you can use buffalo for. I want to know your thoughts, you guys'
Sure.
thoughts on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it's something I've actually really kind of come to terms with very recently, is around the fact this all kind of circles around the conversation of land back, which is obviously a whole other subject. But it's so peripheral because that's what land management is about, is taking care of the landscape and how we belong within it. But when we're talking about like what you're talking about, like bringing back these crops, that type of information is incredibly crucial to understanding what the landscape best responds to. And to do that, we need voices that understand the landscape better than somebody who's been in this country for, in my case, a couple decades. So part of what I try to focus on in this is looking to the histories of indigenous practices, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. Because I think we forget here in the United States that most of the world had indigenous farming practices that were wiped out with global capitalism. And in some places, even in Europe, up until fairly recently, there were traditional practices that had spanned thousands and thousands of years. And if you look at them, there's a lot of similar threads that run through like how humans managed landscapes and how they improved landscapes. And we can see how we've improved landscapes based on things like looking at species that are specialized to human managed landscapes, where they can only exist in those areas. And we've been able to actually increase biodiversity and things like that that couldn't otherwise happen. So it's not as simple as just leaving the landscape alone and saying, well, that's it. So to circle back here into the United States, to manage the landscape in a way that is responsible and reflective of the way the landscape has traditionally been managed requires that we do consider a lot of those traditional practices and try to bring in those voices to help guide a lot of those practices. So you're talking about like saving seeds and heirlooms and things like that. A lot of modern research on things like the honey locust, which is one of my personal favorite trees, it shows that they were actually managed heavily and transported across the landscape by the Cherokee Indians into places that would not be their natural environment. And that's really interesting because we don't think of that as a traditional human food crop. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to start looking at things like that. There's researchers that are looking at species that had been domesticated and then went wild again because of the things that white people did across the country. And those things were lost. There's a lot of species that have been lost, and they're trying to do research to bring those things back, and or at least to understand how they were managed and things like that. And as a white person, it's really difficult to figure out what my place is in those conversations. And it gets more complicated by the fact now we have climate change, where in some cases, the way the landscape was managed in the past can't necessarily be done again. So the principles can still be really guiding for us, but it might not look like it used to. And conversely, we all come with our own learned experiences, for better or worse, regardless of our background. And how do we try to weave all of these things together into something that I guess is respectful and also is pragmatic enough that we can actually do it, which I think sometimes gets lost in a lot of these conversations. Is like, okay, there's a lot of things that we want to do, but how does that ever happen? And ultimately, to me, what I think it really comes down to is like a lot of these things are never going to happen until like the United States doesn't exist anymore. Like that's just ultimately like there's never going to be enough cultural power to make those changes until like there isn't this dominant state that's continuing to push what exists today. So I don't know if I actually answered that. I feel like I kind of meandered a little bit, so I apologize. But if there's anything that you want me to clarify, I'm happy to.
Yeah, you can take a look at what we have for conservation right now, because you would have to take a look at whatever each state claims as conservation land and take a look and see if you can re-indigenize that, because you can't really do it anywhere else. Like it's not like you're going to knock down, an old building or whatever and I don't know, turn that into what it used to be. So I think you have to look at conservation land and what we have right now and what we're doing to either keep it the same or improve on what's there, what's left, basically. Because there's not a whole lot of, Andy, there's conservation land where you are in your area, right? And there's a couple of patches around where I am right now that's still, I think, federal federal land, but there's not a whole lot of conservation land around where we are. But those, as far as I'm concerned, are the only untouched areas where there aren't people until you get further west in the state.
Yeah, and like the thing about conservation lands is that they're not really representative of what the forest should look like because forests have always traditionally been managed.
They're just keeping them the same as far as conservation land goes.
And like one of the things that's a challenge here is that the land's been clear cut multiple times. So like the seed banks and things like that have been totally wiped out. So like that natural progression of the forest that we could traditionally accelerate through different land management practices aren't as simple to do anymore. We can't rely on nature to regenerate itself with our hand, and it has to be more intensive. It has to be more than what we've done in the past. So it's just like a complicated mess, and like this is the problem with a lot of permaculture is that it has this like plug and play idea of what that practice is of how do we make the landscape more productive. They took something that was done in Australia and said, we're going to take this and use it everywhere across the globe, and it's just going to work. And then it doesn't work. Whereas we can speak with people that are indigenous and have managed the land and have stories of how the land was managed and all of these different things that can inform how specific areas based on those local ecologies should be managed. Well, whether or not we should have something similar to sheep or another species that can take care of the understory, whatever it might be, in order for us to actually make the landscape better, more habitable, and more biodiverse, and also support people.
Not goats.
Maybe a few goats. Goats will eat everything.
They'll eat everything.
Why do we hate goats?
They eat everything.
They'll eat everything.
Oh. Now I'm really depressed because there's no goats.
I mean, there can be goats.
You can have a couple goats, not just not
as a
just
treat.
Goats, not just goats.
Goats that you pass around. So when you need to clear some land, you borrow the town goat.
Yeah,
clears the land for you.
Yep.
Yeah, so I've heard of that in like Greece and Italy. They have things like that. You just get the goat around.
Yep. Get rid of that poison ivy wherever it pops up. Goats love that stuff.
Yeah. So did that answer your question? I'm not sure if I got there or not.
Well, I would say that when it comes to like buildings and stuff like that, and re-indigenizing doesn't just mean rewilding, like just stepping back and never touching it again, because there, like as you mentioned, there were managed forests and managed populations of animals and things like that. But that when it comes to land back, it literally is tear down the fucking building. Like, I don't know, yeah. I'm kind of the firebrand when it comes to that. But to me, that is like, if somebody's complaining about a building, fuck your building, tear it down so that we can start to get somewhere with this. But yeah, I am very aware that it's a very like complicated thing, especially because there's so many people to support. And for me, land back does not mean killing off everyone who lives there who happens to be descended from original colonizers or anything like that. Usually, like, okay, so according to someone who we have lambasted on this show before, that is what I think. But it's not actually kill all the colonizers. I understand that there are a lot of there's more people to support now than there would have been during a pre-colonial system kind of that we'd have to worry about. But what I've seen through these efforts from indigenous people, where places like in Minnesota, where they're trying to revitalize the wild rice in the lakes there, that's not only sacred, it also sustains the people who are there, that they have put in so much work. And the same with salmon, people that live off salmon kind of out on the West Coast, they've put in so much work, literally tearing down dams and trying to rewild the streams and the rivers there. And that by stopping it, by saying, well, we don't really want to tear down these buildings or anything like that, you're kind of stopping it before it can start. So I would just say that the point is get rid of some of these structures that are like, I can think of so many places in Florida that these structures are useless. It's cheaper to build a new structure than to reuse an old one. So they clear cut the land, they get rid of all the animals that live there, and then this building lives for a couple of years because they build it like shit, and it's usually a tourist trap, and then it goes to pot after that, and then we've lost everything that growth already had. That it is more about looking at what we have built, get rid of what we don't need anymore, and put in the effort to try to get these things back. Because as much as it is about food and about sustaining people, there's still a lot to be said about the cultures that lived off these food, where these foods are sacred in a lot of ways. These are the things that they've lived on for generations. And I would know a lot of indigenous people who, if they were given the choice of, well, we can keep all these old buildings on the banks of the lakes in Minnesota, or we can get more wild manoomin back, they would say tear down those fucking buildings.
Right. I'm not worried about the buildings. The buildings, they'll always tear down new buildings and put up new buildings. I think the difficult thing is, like Andy said, getting the right voices out there for people to understand what indigenous means and how to indigenize what we have now. Because again, like Andy said, it might not be able to go back to what it was, but we should be able to help make it what it could be, like as best it could be. And I think finding that middle ground is the idea. That might be the best we can do, because I don't know if we can go back. But moving forward seems like a good idea, as long as we can do it with the right voices being heard, and do it the right way, and do it collectively.
So I will say, in case anybody wasn't aware, we are recording on what is Indigenous Peoples Day / Columbus Day in the United States. And now I will cede my voice back to Nelson, who has just been doing busy work at his desk while we discuss this. Tommy's long gone.
Tommy clocked out 2 minutes of the episode. I can see his eyes moving back as he plays Far Cry.
I've been here this whole time. What are you talking about?
While playing Far Cry.
I've talked more than you have.
Oh, yeah,
Get out of here.
I think we can sum up what I just heard.
I don't know dick about farming, okay? I'm never going to survive. Look, the economy collapses, I collapse, it's over with.
This is a re-indigenizing system. Not everybody has to be a farmer. Not everybody has to be a hunter.
I think that
any skill that doesn't require internet access, I'm not going to be any use to anybody.
Just you and your bionic legs.
Yeah, me and my bionic legs.
I'm just the cook, so when the end comes, if you want a hot meal, come my way. Bring your own food, though. I'll cook it for you.
I'm just a kid, and this life is a nightmare. No, I really think that no, I was trying to find the words to like sum up what I heard, and I think that when folks say, don't go chasing waterfalls, please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you used to. I think that really sums it up quite nicely.
I think it does.
Poetry.
Like TLC to bring everything together.
Rest in peace, Left Eye. Oh man. But yeah. So we're fucked. Is basically what I've gathered from all this. So I'm sad.
Typical white guy.
We're gonna be okay.
Typical.
We'll be okay.
Can I grow a bullet tree?
If indigenous North Americans could live through colonization, you can live through a shortage of chicken wings.
If I can live through the many saints of Newark,
the high bar.
Live through anything. I understand. Oh man, I don't want to live in a world without chicken wings.
For the first few months that I was on I was on this show, every time I talked to you guys, y'all were eating chicken wings. This is why there's a shortage. You guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, still have chicken wings. They just won't be on demand.
I'm either going back to the homeland, or Kai said that Kai said our people, because we make good pizza, can get a reservation on Manhattan and Long Island. So that's what we're going to do.
That's oddly specific.
One city block.
Do I have to be like around New Jersey Italians? Because I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
Hey.
We just get Little Italy. It is literally one block. So that's what we get. We get that one block.
As long as I got like 2 fig trees out front, I'm happy.
Isn't that the part of New York where the water makes the best pizza dough?
I heard that was Connecticut. I don't want to believe it.
Is it Connecticut or New York? I thought it was New York.
I'm going to say it's New York, but I think it's actually Connecticut.
Okay. Well, either way, it's in the water, literally. That's where good pizza comes from.
It's the runoff and sweat from our bodies that makes into the groundwater that makes the pizza good.
The fucking Hudson.
You know, the only time I went to New York City, we were staying in a hotel that had room service, and we ordered room service, and I happened to get pizza, and then I had food poisoning for the rest of my trip.
That's because
fuck your pizza.
Pizza. No, you got pizza from the room service out of getting pizza anywhere else in New York. That's your problem. Come on.
I was like half dead after getting off that plane.
Welcome to the
I'm not. My husband actually went out so that he didn't get sick. I was the only one that got sick. He went out and found his street corner hot dog, which is all he wanted in his life.
Didn't get
and then
sick,
I was
right?
sick as a dog for 3 days.
Didn't get sick from eating bathwater hot dogs.
I'm picturing Adam. Time out. I'm picturing Adam going up to a fucking dirty water hot dog stand. Being, hello, can I please have one American hot dog, please?
He doesn't sound like that, Nelson. If y'all ever want to laugh, if y'all ever want to laugh, ask Adam how to say titty bar.
You ever had a street corner hot dog, bud?
Tommy would be imitating Adam right now if he hadn't zoned out.
How am I zoned out? What are you talking about?
Tommy, you ever
Will
had
you answer the
hot dog?
question then?
The question about what? Have I ever had a corner hot dog? Yeah, of course. That's my dog. It's a hot dog stand run by a black guy. It's good as fuck.
In Montgomery.
It's like $30 a hot dog, but it's good as fuck.
Inflation is killing us.
Oh man, you got to get a dirty water one from New York when you don't know when the last time that water was actually changed. It's probably not even water anymore.
What do you mean? What do you mean changed? It's seasoned, bro.
That's another thing. Is that
it's a fucking cast iron skillet of fucking hot dog stand.
Yeah, if anything can grow in there, I would be amazed.
I don't trust anything about New York City at this point because the second time I was supposed to go is when the pandemic hit. We were supposed to be on a road trip going up to New York City when the country shut down.
Yep. Times Square is where you want to be when a pandemic hits the country.
If movies have taught me anything.
You want to shake every hand you see.
Yeah, if movies have taught me anything, it's I want to be in Times Square when a pandemic hits.
Yes. Yep.
To be fair, we planned the trip in like fucking November, and we were supposed to be there in April. So
Kai is actually patient zero for New York.
We didn't fucking go, Nelson. What part of that did you not understand?
You cursed the land. That's why we have COVID.
Y'all got Manhattan for a bunch of beads. I fuck your city up.
Oh man,
a bunch of beads.
Thank God New York had Chris Cuomo, or else they never would have. Andrew Cuomo.
I'm Andrew.
Yeah. Yep. Totally fixed that geriatric problem they had.
Yeah. It's like there's a progression of mayors just like killing off people that they don't like. It's just like Giuliani killed all the homeless people.
They weren't even paying taxes. Let's just get rid of them. It's horrible.
I don't like the old people.
It's absolutely horrible what happened, and I'm making light of it. But it's so I don't know. It's hard to wrap my head around.
Peak America.
I really hope hindsight can make sense of all of this because living through it, it's just I don't know. I don't know how to make sense of it.
He's going to be president. It's all good. In 8 years, Andrew Cuomo is going to be president. Mark my words.
You come here and look talking this filth.
And look at that. I just bought another gun.
We're going to have a first.
You can do it online now. It's so easy.
We're going to have a first Italian American president. And we're going to keep it Columbus Day.
It'd be his whole platform.
Poor gun.
Oh my God. Yes.
Nelson, you see this spot right here? This is where your scalp is going once I finally get to you.
I don't have any hair.
That's okay. We can have the shriveled little skin cap.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, anybody who's on our social media, I'm the one that keeps making scalping jokes. I'm allowed to. Fuck y'all.
That's so fun.
I like the one you made with Syl from The Sopranos. That was dope.
I didn't share that one because it didn't come out very good. I couldn't find a picture with somebody that didn't have a beard. So anybody who's wondering, I did make a very weak Photoshop of the guy that Nelson was talking about, his face on an actual scalping victim, like an actual guy who lived through being scalped. I put his face on it and I said, "You're damn right, it's anti-Italian discrimination."
Just a little off the top.
Oh man. All right, Andy and Elliot, before we wrap this up, y'all got any other things you want to throw out there when it comes to farming and saving the environment and Captain Planet?
Grow shit, go plant shit, do it legally or illegally. There's a lot of options for the illegal stuff. And go follow us.
Mine is make friends with your neighbors, cook at home more, start buying food and cooking it at home, and share with everybody you can. Do leftover swaps and all that good stuff, because you're going to find out the more you share food with people, the closer you're all going to be. And I know that sounds weird with the whole pandemic thing, but even when the pandemic was going on, I had a group of friends who were sharing leftovers and stuff just because people weren't going out to restaurants and all of that. And it actually, it does help. It helps a lot. Just having something different that you normally wouldn't cook or anything like that. Just be, safe with serving and things like that, and you're good to go. But these are the things that are going to help build community. And I think that's one thing that we can always look forward to, no matter how bad things get. People that are living close to you are going to be the people that are going through it with you. And the better we can do with that, the better we can take care of each other. And it doesn't look so doom and gloom as much as Andy wants to say it is. We will have people with robot legs, and there will be good pizza.
Sharing is caring.
Real quick, Elliot could definitely vouch for this. You don't realize how much food gets thrown away until you work in a restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I've seen a lot of it, and it drives me nuts. Throwing so much food away, and not even the food that goes to tables, but just like prepped food that's prepped for the night, and watching all of that stuff get thrown away, and it's untouched. It's, for all intents and purposes, still good food. It's a lot. There's a whole lot. So we can do a lot with that. Share it, exchange it. Don't throw it in the trash. Do what you can and make sure people are getting food. It's something super simple, and you're not going to eat it. And if you were, you would. So it's one of those
chickens.
Things.
Give it to them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And Andy, you brought up chickens earlier. Getting chickens is one of the greatest things. Having your own eggs. You don't have to get 2 chickens. You can have about 4 eggs every day. Every person can eat 2 eggs a day.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they get like better. 1 a day ish.
1 a day. We'll say 1 a day. That's not bad though. Everybody can deal with that.
Went from 4 to 2 to 1.
I thought you said two chickens would lay 4 eggs. 1 egg.
No, 4 chickens will lay 2 eggs.
4 chickens will lay 2 eggs. I got my math wrong. I see. This is why I need Andy for chicken math.
When Laurel listens to this episode, she'll message me and be like, "Actually, the answer is this about chickens." So
probably.
We'll get the
I
answer.
vote right now that our episode is called Chicken Math.
I'm fine with that.
Chicken math. Yes.
I think that's part 3 now.
Where can we and everyone else, our live studio audience and our thousands of listeners, find y'all?
You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Poor Proles Almanac. We also have a website, poorproles.com. That will eventually be up. We are working on a bunch of video content on top of the podcast that's around how to do a lot of this stuff. So we can talk about it a lot, but it's really hard to sometimes visualize. So we end up kind of glossing over certain things that are a little bit more complicated. So we're going to be able to do a lot of that stuff in video content so people can start setting up rain barrels, growing food, getting chickens, grazing sheep, butchering sheep, whatever it might be. We'll do a little bit of everything.
You had to throw the butchering in there to make it even
I saw your
sadder.
eyes just like light up.
But yeah, send me the links. We'll put them in the show notes so people can click on a direct link, because you never want to underestimate laziness, because you'll hear like, oh, find us here, and then it'll be like, how do I spell almanac, and then just give up.
You hear that, everyone? Nelson hates you.
I do.
All of our
respect
lovely
for you.
fans.
If you listen to if you subscribe to our Patreon, you listen to the Patreon series. Last 2 episodes, three or so, how many fucking episodes? You know how much I hate all of you that listen. And Tommy died. Damn, we lost Tommy.
You talk.
No,
One more time and I'm leaving. One more time and I'm leaving.
No, it's a speaking of Patreon episodes, if you listen to our Patreon series, you'll know that it's not just us. It's not just us. Oh man. Anyway, at Dixieland the Proletariat, we lead the South to rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination for all for all oppressed peoples.
I'm here. I'm listening.
Make sure to like.
I'm listening, Nelson. I'm here. I'm here, Nelson.
Make sure to like.
I'm here.
Follow
right
and
here.
subscribe to us at Dixieland the Proletariat,
Nelson
Dixie
sucks.
Pro. If you want to hear more commentary from Tommy, find us on Twitch at .prol. It's DOT Pro. We are invited to Uncle Tommy's Twitch cabin. We're coming to you from the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, Montgomery, Alabama, as well as the United
Nelson
Kingdom.
killed civil rights.
We also would like to recognize we're recording on occupied land that rightfully belongs to the Muskogee Nation.
Nelson occupied that land and made my ancestors work on it for free.
On his family's
Called
pecan
slavery.
plantation. He won't give me the land back, and he won't give you reparations.
He'd rather sell it to a third party who said they're going to get it back.
But
Must
they
be a
won't.
bread tube influencer.
Oh my God. Oh, let's not get that started. Because
I think we need to invite them back for an after dark so we can talk about this.
we're not going to talk bad about Tommy's hero, okay?
Yeah, we'll just keep talking bad about your hero, Bosch.
Yeah. What about poor Tyler, who hasn't said anything this whole episode? Is he
Man,
going to
tell
close
you
us
what,
out?
I'm out here, man. Tell you, woo, I was just in the back cooking meth. You know,
Tyler wasn't paying attention.
I wasn't paying attention. You know, I done. Woo! Tell you what, good Lord willing, and I fucked my cousin. We'll see y'all next time. Woo!
It's so fun. Love it.